tried to pack it in the second half. I've been handling most of this with pretty good grace, I think, for most of the season. This is getting hard just because it's representing the Texans becoming like a genuine total laughing stock. And I know they have been in a lot of ways already, but this is a different level. I didn't expect Kyle Allen to come in and all of a sudden, take over and light the Texans on fire and, become something special or anything. But it's just a complete and total ineptitude in so many ways that's really, really, really hard to stomach. And going into the season that it's going to be bad, but how many times can you have less than 30 yards of offense in the first half? How many times do you have to try to make yourself feel better by somehow salvaging some kind of semblance of dignity in the second half when the quarterback for the other team is just chilling on the sideline? It's really, really hard. Rick says, good graces, you were bad-mouthing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yeah, I went off on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the movie. I like Rudolph the actual, mythical creature. I don't like the claymation movie. This game, okay, you want a metaphor? Thanks, Rick. This Lovie Smith's defense is the Rudolph movie. It's claymation. I'm watching in the first half. And this isn't me being grumpy old man talking about how awesome things used to be. Not at all. Because the Tampa 2 defense was, you would play it deep, play it safe. And one of the things that you had in your back pocket was that when players would go over the middle on crossing routes, John Lynch would come up and take their heads off. Just destroy them. That's what you could do. That's why you could run more conservative defenses. And then you had a good pass rush up front to make it easier to play zone and to break on balls. There was just too much of the easy stuff over the middle today, including a lot of stuff where I was thinking back to 20, 30 years ago when a lot of those throws over the middle would have just gotten guys' heads taken off and they would have been destroyed. That's fine. The Texans were going to get killed regardless of the rules changes or something. I'm not blaming the rules changes for it, but it's in some ways how I think Lovie is mired down still in a different era of football. I think he's changed a lot, but it's just I'm gonna cringe in the post-game press conference if he points to the Dolphins' 66 yards of rushing as somehow a positive in this game, because it obviously wasn't. Lamont says, I think today undoubtedly shows that Pepto-Bismol Hamilton is part of the reason for this offense. We've seen the same stuff from first to second half. Okay, and I'm glad because I know one of the people that replied to one of my earlier videos and a couple of listeners the other day were under the impression that I was blaming the entire offense and all of its woes somehow on Davis Mills. And I've certainly never tried to do that. I've always left it open that on this team this year, when you're one of the worst in the league at multiple things, it usually means you're bad on multiple fronts on the personnel side of things. So I'm not, I think that it certainly very well could be with Pep. I think the one thing that showed up today that's been consistent is the screen game. A quarterback throws a screen pass. It's a pretty simple pass. Sometimes they're bad. Sometimes guys almost get killed because they're high or what have you. It happens with every quarterback. The Texans all season long have largely been unable to run screen passes because the other team sniffs out the screen so quickly. And just, watch when the Chiefs, are a great example. Any of these potent offenses, the Dolphins today, when they run screens or shorter passes, they've got room to run afterwards. The Texans, I think partly because they broadcast and predict and have tells because they're not a high-functioning offense. I don't think they execute well. Partly because of that, they become predictable. But then also because teams can play that. Teams aren't worried about the deep ball. They can play it honest and true. Like with the Texans, you see their defense having to at times, sell out to stop the run so they get beat on play action. And they're so concerned about the deep ball that they don't come up and play the run. I actually think the linebackers gotten a little bit better at that. It was all for naught today. With Pep, the screen games just being poorly executed, the reverses, all of those things. Yes, I think that's a Pep Hamilton thing. I do think that a lack of creativity, when people say a lack of creativity, I never know exactly what they mean because I think it means different things to different people. What I would like to see is a better developed RPO game. I'd like to see not necessarily as many trick plays. Like, hey, they tried the trick play with Laramie Tunsil, the tackle eligible today. Laramie Tunsil did save that one turnover from. I guess Laramie Tunsil would be my player of the game. Without going back and watching there was a lot of pressure on Kyle Allen at times. I got to go back and watch all of those. But like Laramie showed up. Laramie showed up going against his old team. But the other thing too with Pep is that first and 20 in the second half when they called the screen. And it reminded me of the Raiders game when the 2 plays before Davis Mills threw the pick six, there was a really bad pick six at the end of the game. I'm not excusing Davis Mills for that, but they ran Rex Burkhead up the middle twice with 4 minutes left in a game where they needed 2 scores against the Raiders. Like, that's the stuff I don't get. It's a conservatism that doesn't seem justified, merited, whatever you want to say. Bruce says Texans have never been able to run a screen successfully. It is weird, Bruce, because honestly, I think even with Kubiak, I think when Kubiak was in Denver, they looked better running the screens, and sometimes that really is as simple as sometimes that's as simple as the quarterback understanding how to execute things. Like Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was very, very meticulous about disguising run, disguising pass, doing all those things. He knew and understood and respected which tells defensive players could pick up on. I don't think these young guys in Davis Mills or Kyle Allen, who, look, we knew going into this that Kyle's not a great quarterback or hasn't even really proven himself to be a good or confident quarterback yet in the NFL. But it's on the coach with quarterbacks like that to get those guys there. Matthew Graves says, does this mark then the end of the Deceptively Fast podcast? Just need to know where to shut up. Love what you do, Seth. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, I'm going to develop YouTube for a while now. I will not be putting it on the Deceptively Fast podcast for various reasons. David Kramer says, well, I have no words, just very hard to watch. I agree. That's the hard part, I think. Even last year, there were watchable elements to this game. Last year, Davis Mills had 4 games last year where he had over a 100 passer rating, which, like, I know passer rating is not the be-all, end-all by any means, but he had more impressive games last year. There were more games last year where you said, hey, wow, you know what, maybe we're onto something here with Davis Mills last year. You could entertain it. I know that, Show and other guys and many other people didn't want to entertain it at all, and I get that. Obviously, you guys were right. I was willing to entertain it. I'm still, look, I want Bryce Young. I'm full bore all about Bryce Young right now. I've got reservations about his size, but people are talking me out of that. I'm not worried about his height. I'm worried about his diminutive stature. He's got a tiny little gentleman's frame. So I think that it's just a matter of, like, why is Pep Hamilton this much worse? With seemingly the same, if not better, talent, I think that you could make a case at the offensive line just by simply having Titus Howard at right tackle instead of at guard, and by having A.J. Cannon there. Justin Britt was banged up all last year. Dameon Pierce is better. So Pep shows some creativity by having Dameon Pierce and Agumbawale there on the first play of the game. And it goes nowhere because when blocking isn't executed, when the play itself isn't executed well, it doesn't really go anywhere. I do think they tried to work in a little bit more of a genuine zone read because Kyle Allen's more comfortable with that, more adept at it. He's done it before. But when you look at these quarterbacks, I mean, we've seen it now how many weeks in a row. Not weeks in a row because I don't want to throw Heineke into the same category as some of these other quarterbacks, but just watching the backfield machinations, the fakes, the handoffs, the suddenness that they do certain things with, it's just a different level of quarterback. And do you want to go through a year of trying to figure out whether Pep Hamilton and Lovie Smith are the guys to do it? Frankly, right now I'm not in the mood for it. And it would be one thing if the Texans were even as competitive as they were last year, but that's the problem too. I don't think David Culley was the answer. I give Lovie Smith more leeway and more slack, or I did at the beginning, because I think there's simply some things that he does that look, sound, and smell like an NFL coach compared to David Culley. But it was a more competitive football team last year. It was a more credible product on the field in a lot of ways. This team, and it was very evident when Lovie decided to kick the field goal on 4th down in the extremely tight red zone, that this team is content to try to keep it within a couple scores, maybe even work your way back up to 1 score so you can credibly say in the press conference, hey, we were within 1 score at the end of the game. And that's just not the way it should be. You're still throwing screens with enough time left in the game to conceivably score a couple times, and you're not doing it. And the other team's got their backup quarterback out there, and the other team can't. Honestly, Mike McDaniel's going to have a talk. I'm not going to get mad at Mike McDaniel on this Texans podcast, but Mike McDaniel's got to learn how to close a game out. The Texans shouldn't have been anywhere remotely as close to that. I'm mad at Mike McDaniel because now on the stat sheet, it looks more credible than it actually was. The Texans was only 210 yards of offense, but that's not as bad as only 100 yards of offense. Hey, they had 9 passing first downs. Texans were 2 of 13 in 3rd down efficiency. Then you look over at the Dolphins, and they were 4 of 15 on passing on 3rd down. And you might say to yourself, oh, wow, the Texans really got it going in the second half. And I'll credit them with continuing to play hard, but you just look at this game. Dolphins, 1st drive, field goal. 2nd drive, touchdown. Third drive in the first half, punt. 4th drive of the game, touchdown. Scores 17-0 at that point. 5th drive of the game, field goal, scores 20-0 at that point. 6th drive of the game, field goal on 11 plays, 71 yards, scores 30-0 at the end of the first half. And then you got there in the second half, and I don't think it was anything schematically that the Dolphins were doing that was loosening up necessarily. It was just simply that there is a psychological letdown there. And I'll credit Kyle Allen for the deep shot to Brandon Cooks. Jordan Akins for overcoming his turnover and playing his ass off. I think that's right. Right now, I'm looking at guys. Let me get my pen here. I've only got my marker. I'm looking at guys who are playing their asses off. Like Jerry Hughes. I like that Jerry Hughes flipped the hell out in that on that goal line play. Jerry Hughes, simply for flipping out and kicking a garbage can, is somebody who's kicked garbage cans on multiple occasions. Never would again. I would never do harm to a garbage can those days. Don't cancel me. I've abused a lot of garbage cans. Jerry Hughes was playing his ass off. Laramie Tunsil was still playing hard. Give me names for people who were playing hard at the end there. Jordan Akins, I thought. Let's see. Cullen the Irishman says, it just seems like offensively they're just done. The scheme is bad. Even if it was good, the talent just isn't there to execute. Yeah, and that's the tough thing. That's the tough thing about tanking when I don't think they meant to tank this hard. This is what I'm always struggling with this team. It seems like they undershot on just how bad they could be. And if they were seriously trying to be this bad, I would just say, hey, look, I'd chalk it up to the tank. We saw the Astros do it, it worked out great. But they have not done this in the way that a lot of other teams have tanked in football. There aren't a lot of strict examples of it, but the Browns were a team that was getting rid of veteran contracts and not necessarily signing more expensive veterans to bring in. The Texans aren't being aggressive in free agency. But they've been more aggressive, I think, than somebody who is trying to go 1-9-1. And that's a frustrating thing, is that I don't want something to seep into this team that exists in some places where it's it's a vibe you can't shake. It's something that it persists from year to year because veterans stop caring and they set that example to young guys, and young guys start worrying more about their salaries than actually, playing good football. I think, ironically enough, the Dolphins are probably a great example of how you can get it done. And they were supposed to tank for Tua. Didn't work out because they signed Fitzpatrick and they ended up winning more games than they thought they were going to. That's certainly not going to be a problem for the Texans this year. But they were hapless in a lot of ways. Going into the game last year with the Texans, they'd only won 2 games at that point. They were 2-5 or 2-6. Then they went on a great streak after that game and almost won out the second half of the season. Still fired their coach. Speaking of which, with firing the coaches, I think I saw John Crumpler, who blogs about the Texans, make the point that I think when it comes to the optics of what happens if you fire a coach again after 1 year and all of the other issues that come with that, this performance on the field has been bad enough that I don't think you have to worry about the optics of that. Clint B says, "Oh, it's Seth, the dude whose dulcet tone rages in my ears on Mondays after Texans losses." Thanks, Chief. I don't rage as much as I used to. I'll try to. I can't. There's a couple things that happened. One, my anger got better in general through a few life revelations. Two, you can only stay angry at a football team or with an organization for so long before you got to start trying to figure out ways to reframe it in your brain. And the way I'm reframing this is, at some point, if you look at the Bills, if you look at maybe the Browns at some point here, if you look at some of the previously hapless organizations, even the Lions in some respects have just some life to them right now. Look at previously hapless organizations. The Bills would be the great example right now, because they weren't winning at all. The Chiefs at least were always competitive before they took off and got it. But it's usually a matter of finding the right executive, finding the right head coach, and the owner letting them go to work. For whichever mistakes Cal has made in hiring, and with the whole Easterby/Bill O'Brien dynamic and that fiasco of a year, I think that Cal is an owner that's going to give guys financial reasons. Anyway, you guys don't need the song and dance from me, but it's, it is what it is. Matthew Graves says, "I want Bryce as well. Does this game show that we need a new offensive staff? I'm afraid if we draft a quarterback first overall, this offensive scheme will ruin whatever potential they have." Yeah, this was, and Lamont says, "I think blaming talent is a shitty excuse if you took the job." Yes. If you and I don't think Lovey has blamed the talent. I think Lovey went into this with eyes wide open. He's been around. He's seen, he's seen the way it is. And Illinois turned it around very quickly after he left. You've got that dynamic to think about. As far as Pep Hamilton, it's not even a matter in this instance of whether you can really divine out who's wrong or how much is it Pep versus how much is it Davis Mills. I think you got to start with a fresh slate. And Pep Hamilton has had several chances now, to prove some level of offensive mastery or being a mastermind, and it hasn't been that. It just hasn't quite been that. I think as a quarterbacks coach, I think he did good things with Davis Mills last year. I think maybe that's his best position in the NFL. He might be brilliant at that. I know defensive line coaches, offensive line coaches, some of the people I respect most in the world have been awesome at those jobs and brilliant at those jobs, but that's because that's where they should be, and they're not necessarily great either as coordinators or head coaches. So I don't know. Everybody always wants to be the manager. Screw that. Be the best damn employee you can be. I think that if you go up against a Mike McDaniel, it's really hard. When you look around at LaFleur, at least where it was for a couple of years there, LaFleur, and I don't think LaFleur is the issue right now. LaFleur in Green Bay came in and worked with a guy in Aaron Rodgers who'd become in a lot of ways like a mediocre plus quarterback. He just was not the same guy, and he turned it around completely. Sometimes you get a Nathaniel Hackett, but we all know, look, Nathaniel Hackett was a little bit of most likely the Broncos thinking, wow, Aaron Rodgers says nice things about Nathaniel Hackett. Maybe if we get him here, we can lure him into the fold. And he wasn't a guy that had been born and raised in the Sean McVay system. So I've never, ever been one to say, hey, go hire an offensive coach, because I think it's too simple, and I think people force their hand too much when they do that. You hire a Josh McDaniels, for instance. But having said that, I really would love somebody, if Bryce Young's going to come in here, that can come in, install a Kubiak/McVay type of system, some kind of roots in that, and it doesn't have to be in that lineage, but somebody that's got some genuine juice to them. Like, give me a genius. Sean and I were talking about this off air yesterday. We were texting about it because I was driving around thinking about quarterbacks like I tend to do, and what I thought was, what is it about? Okay, evaluating quarterbacks, it's really hard. What is the it factor? Because you look at Bryce Young and you think, okay, there's some kind of it factor there. He's just, and you can point to stats about how scrambling and how many times he improvised to make throws and all of that stuff. But I went back and I started looking through Hall of Fame quarterbacks and thought about like Hall of Fame quarterbacks in the modern age. And if you're trying to assess or evaluate just it factor or whatever that is, because I hate saying it factor, I kind of started imagining like, okay, can I envision these guys being pool hall hustlers? Like guys that if they were so morally inclined to do so, could they actually go in and they got enough of a glint in their eye, but also just like this extreme confidence in the face of danger and all of that other stuff, and it's just a certain charisma. Like, could these guys be a pool hall hustler? And you go through, like, okay, go through the class of 84 or 83. Okay, Elway, yes, for sure. Elway probably was. Maybe after he was done playing for a little while. Jim Kelly, hell yes. Dan Marino, of course. So Peyton Manning, yes. Like, he's, as much as he wants to be a Boy Scout, he's got kind of like a devilish side to him. The only guy in the modern era that I couldn't see fit there was Steve Young. And like, I think even Roger Staubach could do it. And I think Bryce Young has that ability too. He's just got that glint in his eye. He plays like he's got a glint in his eye. And I think Steve Young, if he'd been brought up in different circumstances, had a little bit more dysfunction in his household growing up, I think he could have done it, but he's just too pure. He's too good. Bruce says Nick is still trying to clean up the mess left by B.O.B. and Jack. Yeah, Bruce, I'm okay with Nick for now. I think if you look at where the salary cap is and how long you have to give a draft class time to really prove themselves. And I'll tell you honestly, let me look up the Texans draft history real quick here, and I'll pull it up for us. If you look at the Texans drafts from the last couple of years, like, I'm okay. I still feel like the arrow is pointing up for a lot of these guys, like more so than like, obviously not Davis Mills, but a lot of these guys, I feel like the arrow's still pointing up for them. Christian Harris got hurt today. I was upset about that. Let's see, Texans draft history, if it pulls up. There we go. So you guys can look along at this. All right, so Derek Stingley Jr., I feel good about him. I would have loved to have seen him out there today. I wish they would use him more aggressively. If you look at Des King's out there when he plays on the outside. He's jamming people. I think they give him a little bit more authority. This would be a nice project to do during the week, to kind of come up and be aggressive and take some chances and risks. And it's worked out for them for the most part. I mean, they're playing super conservative, so guys don't really get tested. Even when they're playing man, they're still playing it conservatively. Kenyon Green, I'm still cautiously optimistic that a lot of what this is technique, and he's improved incrementally in some things. He needed his ass whooped this year to figure out, like, oh, okay, this is what I can and can't do. And I'm still holding out hope for him, because I've seen him move and do things that look like a good offensive guard. He needs to figure it out. Jalen Petre's got to clean up some things, but I feel good about him. John Mechie, We don't know for sure, but we'll see. Christian Harris, I feel good about. I wish Christian Harris hadn't gotten injured today, and hopefully it's not too bad. But he's coming along, like he's learning. He's progressing. The difference is night and day between what he was when he first showed up in that first regular season and now. Dameon Pierce, I feel very good about. The run game has been stymied the last couple of weeks. I don't think it's for any lack of explosiveness or ability out of Dameon Pierce. I think this team is just being found out in a bad way. Booker, Quatoriano, and Austin Deculus. Deculus is going to be a project, and kind of you took a flyer on him. It's a 6th-round offensive tackle. That's fine. Quatoriano, one of the best hits of the game, unfortunately, was Quatoriano hitting a dude who was trying to block on that last interception. So Quatoriano's got some juice. I'll put him on there. Quatoriano, I think he's the right kind of nasty. And going back to last year, Davis Mills, no. Nico Collins, yes. Brevin Jordan, my God, where are you? Garrett Wallow, inactive today. Roy Lopez, he is what he is. I think he can be a rotation player, but those guys are late round picks. Garrett Wallow, mid to late round pick. I'm okay with those guys for now. It's just that this next draft class with lots of picks, they need to get it going. Let's see. Matthew says Lamont makes a good point. If you have to point at the bad job of the guy before you to justify that you're doing a good job, you suck at your job. Yeah, I think there's no rationalizing really anything right now that when you're the worst in the league at something, and the Texans, the scariest stat I saw today that I hadn't seen before was by Brooks Cabina in the Chronicle. I think did they have 24 yards per drive on average? It's just something abysmally low, like barely, like 1 first down basically per drive. And yeah, you can't live with that. And nobody gets an excuse for it. They gotta nail it at some point. Cullen says it's the only team that makes me physically angry, like Seth on the radio level angry. I know the feeling, my friend. I want to do this though too. Like, these are Texans versus the Dolphins, full highlights from the first quarter, which basically was the entire game. So if you're, that's ultimately the entire first quarter was about all there was to really watch in this game. Sometimes we know by the end of the third quarter that this game is over, but today we could tell that it was over pretty much immediately. So let's see. First quarter, okay, creativity. This was Dameon Pierce and Agumbawale in the backfield at the same time. And that's honestly like, okay, they run like a counter tray, a little bit of misdirection in the backfield, but look at them getting their asses kicked like immediately to where if Agumbawale hits it, no, there's no place to go on that. There's just no place to go. I liked showing the two backs in the backfield. Let me get you out of here, Matthews. They run the lead. Sorry, guys. This is what it's like watching film. It's awful. Like the coach rewinds it 78 times, and you watch your worst mistakes over and over again. I won't do this on it. Okay, so the Dolphins in a diamond front here. They're loaded up at the line of scrimmage. This is like the closest thing to a 6'2" stack monster that, actually it's basically 6'2" stack monster. Remember from All the Right Moves? So it's a hell on earth versus the run, but nobody gives a damn about the pass. But it's also because they've got everybody in the box here. So it's not like the Dolphins respect the Texans run so much that they're loaded up like this. It's that they've got everybody in the box. And the problem when you do that is when you turn it into a rugby scrum, if you don't have big ass, like hog mollies that can just whoop ass, and I mean, that's not the ass that needs to be getting whipped here. This is the wrong ass. This is the ass wearing a blue jersey getting whipped. And then you've got your linebacker turned fullback coming up the gut, and he's getting stood back. There's too many. Whenever you can see, look at the numbers of the offensive linemen. You see I see a 34. I see an AJ Can. I see a Quesenberry. I can see the 5s there. Like, those guys are getting stood up. They're just losing the physical battle. So nothing. I don't even know why this isn't the first quarter highlights. Now I'm gonna get now. See, now I'm gonna get upset at stuff I already got upset at. All right, okay, flee in the pocket there. I'll accept that. He's on the run. He had Burkhead. I'm not watching the punts. All right. Gonna watch the wham block coming right here. I think this ended up being play action, right? Yeah. And Steven Nelson was manned up on him. I think they were playing like two man. But they were eating them up over the middle over and over again. This felt like, remember when Eli was like had his last good game ever versus the Texans? That's what this is right here. Like when he just dissected the Texans over the middle. I do think that the Texans have started playing a little bit stouter against the run. And I mean, sometimes the call has helped them out, and Lovey called some run blitzes today. But it also just when they're playing their base defense, I do see I think Christian Harris has something to do with it. I think maybe Christian Kirksey might even be playing a little bit better versus the run because he likes playing next to Christian Harris. I'm open to it. Okay. See that right there? Okay, watch Christian Harris, 48, right there. Like at least he's coming up and he's taking on blocks, which is something that you weren't really seeing out of Kamu Grugier-Hill. And he's not perfect with it all the time. You know, ideally he'd be able to stand that guy up and keep his feet in a picture-perfect world. But that's the kind of stuff that's making a difference. And I could look forward to next year and say like, oh, okay, well, Christian Harris, I feel good about him. I think he might end up being somebody. Lamont says he feels like he's cheating, double listening to Sean and Seth at the same time. Sean, I cleared it with Sean beforehand. Everybody's got to make their way in this world these days. Okay, okay, good. By Christian Harris. I'm going to get excited about Christian Harris now. See? It's no big deal, but he's dialed. Okay. All right, I'll get happy about this play. I'm going to get happy about meager gains, and this is why. Christian Harris, I'm going to make my cursor bigger here in a minute. Okay, Christian Harris is playing the run. He's up here, actually. He's manned up on one of these backs, and Christian Kirksey's manned up on one of the other backs. So Christian Harris is playing the run, but diagnoses and gets the hell out. Like, okay, that's being an actual linebacker and making reads and doing linebacker things. That's an improvement on where he was a few weeks ago. It helped, by the way, that the Dolphins barely tried to run at all in this game. This is where you get nervous. I mean, they're just giving up huge swaths. All right, I'm gonna watch this. Okay, watch right here. This is bad. Oh, is this the hold? That's the hold. Okay, this one's bad up here. A guy gets his ass kicked, but this was good. I remember seeing this live. All right, look, Dolphins. If you get caught holding that bad versus the worst run defense in the NFL, you should have to run gassers immediately after that. Run gassers at halftime. You guys need to be able to hear my voice. Seriously, like, fuck. What the? All right, so that's Dez. Dez still had his eyes in the backfield. You see what this is where I wonder with Tagovailoa. I think he's really, really good. Were you guys? Tell me if you guys were impressed with his accuracy today. I'm not. I'm not trying to hate on the guy just because so many people said that that he's got the most accurate arm of anybody who's ever lived. But I wasn't that impressed with his accuracy. Why do the Texans pick up players off the waiver wire and not use them? What's the point? I don't know, man. I don't know exactly why they do that. It's frustrating. Oh, the turf. Okay. I don't know. Look, the Texans were the only ones slipping in the turf today. This is something that like equipment managers and or players, and honestly the coaches are in on this too. Guys are supposed to go out and test their cleats beforehand on crappy playing surfaces like that. It honestly does make me a little worried or nervous about what the process is there, that so many Texans were slipping on that turf. And I don't, maybe I'm just noticing the Texans more. I didn't see the Dolphins having nearly as much an issue with it. And this is a literal pain in my ass, because when I was playing in a meaningless game against the Cleveland Browns, the last game of the year in 2005, was it 2005? It was 2005 or 2004. Meaningless game, last game of the year in 2004, whenever it was. We were playing the Browns, and we were on a crappy field at the NRG Stadium. And I didn't sue them or anything. It's part of football is football. You're going to have bad playing services, in my opinion. So, in case they hired D'Amico, don't use that against me if they hired D'Amico, because D'Amico sued him. But I got combo blocked, and the series before, I had thought to myself, man, I got to do something at halftime. I got to change my cleats. This field's too slippery. I'm sitting on the bench. I'm thinking, should I do it now? Then all of a sudden there was a quick change, or we were back out there before I realized. And I was all heavily spatted on my legs all the time, so I didn't really have time to do everything right then. I get back out there. I'm wearing the wrong shoes on a crappy field. I get combo blocked, and I turn into the combo block, and I do a full split down to the ground with 600 pounds on top of me, and I tore my hamstring right off my pelvis. And so there, I'm especially sensitive to this. These guys are sliding around out there today. It was kind of scary, and either Lovey's got to do a better job of keep reminding those guys, or the players and equipment staff have to do it. I'm not going to get a federal case out of it or anything, but Jordan Richards says, who is going to be the next caretaker head coach? Right. This is where I don't know. This is the question. How responsible is Caserio? How much do you blame him for the shambles of a hiring process of the last two seasons? Because Lovey came in, last year Caserio came in, within days he finds out that Deshaun Watson, A, is unhappy, and B, has requested a trade. So there's that. And David Culley was hired under those circumstances before anybody knew anything about the allegations against Deshaun. There were rumors that other guys were in the fold, but it was an atypical situation. And were the Texans at that point considering tanking then and there? I think possibly. It was weird and ham-handed the way it was all handled, because you very much got the sense that they were trying to reach out to Deshaun in multiple ways, and yet they weren't interviewing Robert Saleh. They weren't going after guys that seemingly Deshaun either had voiced support for, and they hired David Culley, who nobody talked about as a head coach candidate anywhere. Was that an olive branch to Deshaun Watson somehow, like based on what? Other than their experience together at the Senior Bowl? Was that correct, if I remember correctly? And then whether, and the part that would be embarrassing is if they thought that, oh, well, he's an African-American head coach and Deshaun will like that we did that, because that's almost more insulting in a lot of ways than hiring like somebody like Sean Payton or somebody like that. Like Deshaun for whatever his other faults are, is a guy who wants to win football games and wants a good coach. And like to think that if that were the reasoning behind it, it would be embarrassing because it would kind of be simplifying and diminishing Deshaun's, actual judgment about winning football games like that, and that he must care about one thing way more than the other. So I don't know. That was just weird. You get into this year, and I do think that they were still sorting out the Easterby dynamic. Should Caserio have been more aware of that? Yes. Should nobody have given Easterby, and I'm not trying to be conspiracy minded about this or anything. I'm just thinking very above board, given how much authority Easterby had over many things, should he ever have been granted that authority or had that power or influence? Without anything that's expose worthy or anything, I would say no. And I think that it's fair to say he's a very charismatic person who has an ability to pull people, into his fold and influence them. I think that a lot of people were influenced in the wrong directions by Jack Easterby. And I'm not even trying to say anything headline worthy there. I think it was just a bad hire, and he was in a bad role for what his skill set is. So I'd hold Caserio and Cal McNair responsible for that. But to lay everything at Caserio's feet right now, I just can't do it, and maybe that's maybe I'm just being soft, but I can't go that far right now. So is this game over yet? No, it's 3-0.